Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, welcome back to the channel. So I recently put out a video on the top 3 items for every role, just like a condensed look at like what you should be building in the meta right now. But I know a lot of people like to see a full tier list, and I haven't made one of these for a while. I don't even know if I've made one this season, actually. And I know a lot of people enjoy this, like, more kind of like overview of like everything that's in the meta, what you should be building, what you shouldn't be building. And for those of you that want to watch a more long tier list video instead of just a breakdown of the top 3 items, I know some of you do like that. This will be a very long video. I think there's like 131 items to rank because I'm also doing starters. I'm not doing individual glyphs, I'm just going to talk about those when I place the item. But yeah, there's a lot of items to cover here, so basically, without further ado, let's just jump right in. I've got them ordered by trees and everything, so we're going to be starting off with the Transcendence tree. So Transcendence, I think, is not so great right now. Is B or A? Probably B, I would say. Transcendence got hit pretty hard in the power reduction patch. It got a reduction to the base power and also the conversion, so it offers a lot less power now. It's not a bad item, though. I think you can still absolutely get away with this on high power scaling junglers, ones that AA cancel a lot, because obviously 100% power scaling on physical basic attacks, so, you know, gods like Susano, gods like maybe Loki, possibly even Thor if you're going full damage, you can still absolutely build Transcendence and it's an okay item, but it's absolutely not a top of the meta item, in my opinion. It did get hit pretty hard in the patch. Heartseeker, I would say, is an A tier item. Got buffed a little bit recently. Well, not buffed, more so fixed, where you can actually like hit the power requirement reasonably now to get the maximum damage out of it. And this is still a really good item for ability-based hunters and ability-based assassins to be able to hit tanks relatively hard. You know, it's percent max HP damage, also has a percent pen on it. Decent power as well. This item's still solid, but not on top of the meta or anything like that. Hydra's Lament, A tier. The gods that use it really well. It's got really good stats on it. Comes with power, MP5, cooldown reduction, percent pen, and obviously that bonus damage on your basic attacks. AA cancelling junglers like Thor, Susano, Loki, those kind of gods will love this item. Dominance we'll put in A very solid option right now for hunters. You're going to see this in basically every single hunter build, but it's not an S tier item because it's not carrying the build or anything, it's just one of their go-to percent pen options. You know, a lot of hunters right now with the kin size builds, you're building this and Executioner and maybe even Titan's Bane in the same build to be able to shred the rampant tanks right now, so absolutely a solid item, should be in basically all of your ADC builds in my opinion. And moving on to the Mace tree, we have Jotuns, which I think is an S tier item. It didn't get hit too hard by the power reduction because it's not a straight up power item. You know, it still has that 10 flat pen, it still has that 20% cooldown, it still has that great glyph which even got buffed recently to provide even more CDR to your abilities. Jotuns is a quintessential item in this meta in my opinion. On most ability-based junglers, this is going to be your first item unless you want Brawler's Beatstick, which we'll talk about in a second. And unless you're somehow getting enough cooldown in the rest of your build through like maybe a Transcendence, a Hydra's, and then something else, you're probably going Jotuns on ability-based junglers right now. The Crusher, also an S tier item. This probably, I would say at the moment, outclasses Heartseeker in terms of your percent pen option. Has that same percent pen, also has that bonus damage on all of your abilities, very similar to Heartseeker. These items kind of fill a similar role. Heartseeker is a little bit more targeted towards tanks, whereas Crusher will do a little bit better against squishies, but they both do pretty well against tanks. This provides a little bit of attack speed as well, if that's useful for you. Crusher is a really, really good item right now and should be in basically all of your ability-based hunter and ability-based assassin builds. Brawler's Beatstick will drop in A tier. It's a decent item. If you do need that anti-heal, you should be going this on ability-based junglers and hunters. It's as simple as that. It's got 15 flat pen and good power. It's going to provide good damage for you, and if you need that anti-heal, you buy this. Titan's Bane will drop in A tier as well. Similar to Dominance, this is kind of like just a go-to in hunter builds at the moment if you really need that extra percent pen to be able to shred people. Obviously, insane on like ability-based hunters as well, should absolutely be core in that kind of build. And sometimes you might want Titan's Bane on ability-based junglers if you're really looking to burst down some tanks. You know, if tanks are giving you a problem and your team aren't really dealing with them, you can grab a Titan's Bane in your ability-based jungler builds. It's not a main build for ability junglers in my opinion, but if you do need that extra percent pen, it's really good, and then it's a main build in a lot of hunter builds as well. Bloodforge, I think, is fine. Is it A or is it B? I'll probably drop Bloodforge in B because it is a little situational. The power nerfs hit it pretty hard. It doesn't really provide as much power as it used to. It doesn't really hit as hard. But if you're getting a lot of kills, snowballing on an ability-based jungler or maybe even on some hunters, you can get away with this absolutely. It's more of an ability-based jungler item than it is a hunter item. But yeah, if you're getting a lot of those kills, this item can provide snowball in the fights to like close out the game. Devos, probably an S tier item right now. There's a little bit of contention on certain ADCs going Assy over Devos, but in my opinion, Devos is still better. That 15 flat pen that it offers is kind of insane. Once it's stacked up, it definitely provides better overall stats than Assy. Assy comes online a lot faster, and so if someone does go Assy into your Devos, they will outtrade you for a little bit, but once you get it stacked, this item's going to be more efficient than Assy, and I think it's really good right now. Obviously, only built on Hunters, but where it is built, absolutely a solid item in this meta. Soul Eater, I'll throw in B. It is decent on some characters, you know, Pele likes this in the jungle, a few Soul Eaters kind of like this that don't have innate sustain in their kit, they like to go Soul Eater, you know, maybe Mulan or something like that. Mulan does have innate sustain, but she does really well with Soul Eater. And of course, very popular on Matikaras at the moment, maybe a couple of other ability-based Hunters, but the item's not insane right now. The lifesteal that it provides got nerfed pretty hard in 10.3 and hasn't really been buffed to compensate. It's an okay item. On the gods that you want it, you can still build it, absolutely, but it's not anything crazy right now. Shadow Drinker will put in C or D. I think I'll only put it in C because the actual base stats that it provides are kind of solid. You know, it has that flat pen, it has that power, it has that movement speed, which is all stats you want on an ability-based jungler. The problem is the passive is basically useless. But when you go invisible, you're either going to get pinged out of it by damage, or you're going to want to attack someone and you immediately go uninvisible. It's just a very hard item to use effectively, and I don't think it's that great right now. Hasten Katana will put in B, similar to Soul Eater, I guess. On the gods that you want Hasten Katana on, like Kali, you're going to want to build this, Bakasura maybe as well, but it's not anything crazy. The base stats are pretty horrible. You just build this if you need it on your auto attacker junglers and stuff. Serrated Edge straight to S tier. This item's insane right now. Provides an insane amount of stats in a meta where stats are much harder to come by because of all the nerfs that we've seen. Serrated, you know, movement speed, percent pen, power, lifesteal, more power and lifesteal on the passive. This item's just a gigantic stat stick, and it's basically the best at what it does in terms of just providing you a ton of useful stats for your ability-based junglers. Also, auto-attack junglers can build this as well. That's completely fine. Golden Blade, we will drop in, I guess, B. Yeah, we'll drop it in B, because it's a similar situation to Katana, where, like, if you want Golden Blade, it's not really in the solo meta anymore. You're not seeing, like, Hercules, and I guess for mana probably does still build this in solo, but it's not as much of a meta solo anymore. But if you need this on certain junglers, you know, Kali, Bakasura is really good on those kind of picks, Arachne as well, but it's a little bit situational, so we'll drop it in B. Rage, crit is really not the meta right now, so all of these crit items are going to be placed a little bit lower for that reason. We'll drop Rage in B. It's a solid item, don't get me wrong, it provides a lot of crit chance and a decent amount of power once you stack it up, and it's kind of your, you know, this competes with Bladed Boomerang, which we'll talk about in a second, for like your big crit chance bomb that can allow you to enable your other crit chance on hit effects like Deathbringer and Demon Blade. But yeah, crit isn't great right now. We'll drop Bladed Boomerang in A tier simply because I think it is better than Rage in terms of that high crit chance bomb. Provides generally better stats, has movement speed, has attack speed. Generally a better item for your go-to like high crit chance. Actually, looking at this now, maybe we'll do this. We'll put Rage in C and we'll put Bladed Boomerang in B, and then we'll drop Deathbringer in A, because Deathbringer is kind of the reason you go crit. It has two really good glyphs. Well, one really good glyph and one kind of situational, sometimes good glyph, I suppose. Deathbringer, you know, it's the reason you go crit. It's very strong. If you're going to go crit, this has to be in your build, absolutely. A Demon Blade will drop in B. It got hit pretty hard with the crit nerfs. Used to be like probably the best crit item in the game because of all the stuff it provides. You know, power, movement speed, attack speed, percent pen. It just had everything you needed. It still has everything you need, but in much lower quantities due to the nerfs to crit that occurred a little while ago. And so I don't think Demon Blade is as good as it used to be. It's just a B tier item. Probably should still be in your crit builds in my opinion. If you're gonna go crit, it's probably these three items here that you should be going. Maybe you can swap out Bladed Boomerang for Rage if you want to. But yeah, crit's not great right now. All of these items are basically shifted down a tier for that reason. Arendite will probably drop in B. Got hit pretty hard by the power reductions. I think it only has like 50 power now, which is a far cry from what it used to have. Not so great, but I still do kind of like this item on certain junglers that like to engage with their ultimate. You know, Thor, Raven in jungle, stuff like that. Obviously, Raven's not really being played in jungle right now. He's being played in solo, but this item's really solid on those kind of characters, in my opinion. It's not bad, but it's also nothing too special. Fail Not, we will drop in probably B. Little bit situational, you know, you have those like hydrogen explosive one-shot builds with Jingwei, you have this being a main build on Matikaras, but other than that, you don't really see this item too much. I think it is a little underrated, and I'm very close to putting it in A just because it provides insane stats. You know, 20% cooldown, 10% pen, a bunch of power, that crit passive. This item's just really well statted, and I think if crit builds were a meta, this might come back into the meta with crit builds. So I'm tempted to put it in A, but I think we'll leave it in B for now, because you don't really see it built outside of Jingwei and Matikaras at the moment. Staff of Muradin I think is pretty good. We'll drop it in A. Comes with decent stats, power, percent pen, and that that passive that is a little bit situational. You mainly want this on gods that can cast their ultimate, and it affects the ultimate as well. So I think this works with Jonqui, works great on Merlin, works great on Vulcan, works great on Zeus. You know, any of those gods where their ultimate comes out and they're going to get boosted by the damage of this passive is going to be a good item for. There's always a nice graphic that I like to put up. I'll see if I can find it to put it in the video of gods that utilize Muradin on their ultimate's actual damage. I'll put that up if I can find it. But yeah, I think this item's pretty good. A little bit situational though. You don't want it on every single mage by any means. Pribwin, straight to S tier. If there was an S plus tier, Pribwin will be in that. Probably the best item in the game right now. The glyphs it got are absolutely ridiculous. Mainly Red Pribwin. Red Pribwin is just absolutely insane right now. The damage that item is putting out is just bopping people for like 300-400 damage, even post mitigations. It's just a ridiculous item. The tank stats are a little bit lacking, but 20% cooldown is really nice. The glyphs are insane. Blue Pribwin glyph, in my opinion, is still really good. It's just being outshadowed by Red Pribwin, which is literally broken. It's just ridiculous right now. Pribwin, one of the best items in the game, if not the best item in the game. Atalanta's Bow, I guess C tier. This item really sees no play. They changed the percent pen to flat pen, so in theory, maybe this will be a little better for like maybe junglers that want to get active in the early game, auto attack junglers like Kali and Baka, but it really sees no play, to be honest. This item's kind of garbo. If you're going to go it on like those kind of characters, you should probably just go Hasten Katana instead. Silver Branch will put in D. This item got obliterated for seemingly no reason in a recent patch. You can't stack the attack speed overcap as high as you used to be able to, so on the few gods that might have wanted this with really strong steroids like Artemis or Apollo, they don't even want to build this anymore because it is kind of capped on what it can provide you. And yeah, even in a meta where we're seeing high attack speed, kin size shred builds, no one's building this item. That's when you know it's bad, because that's the perfect spot for this item. You know, in the crit meta, you can kind of see why people won't want to build this, because you don't get to that high of an attack speed. But in the current meta, attack speed shred builds are the meta, and no one's using this, so it's clearly a garbage item. Odysseus Bow will drop in A. Really solid item for the attack speed kin shred builds right now. Should probably be in all of those builds in terms of like 5th or 6th slot maybe. The base stats aren't great with just 30% attack speed, but that passive overall increases your DPS to a single target and also allows you to spread that damage around the fight and ping people for good damage. Odysseus Bow is really solid right now. Not on top of the meta or anything, but a really good facilitating item for the kins builds. RC will drop in A. I mentioned this with Devos, that these two items kind of compete for like your first item lifesteal rushes and ADC. Some people have been experimenting with RC, and it's possible it's better than I'm rating it here, but in my opinion, it is still worse than Devos. It's a decent option, but nothing too insane. Kin size straight to S tier. The pinnacle, the core of ADC builds right now. Everyone's going kin size shred builds. This item's ridiculous. Shreds tanks. Does a little bit less against squishies since they nerfed it, but this item's still really good. Absolutely should be the go-to kind of style of build that you're going for ADCs right now. I mentioned it with crit, that this is the style of build you're going for right now. Crit isn't really in the meta. Executioner. We'll drop in A tier. Similar to Dominance, this is like really good for facilitation for the king size damage. It's protection reduction, so it will boost your Odysseus Bow procs, your kin size procs, all that kind of stuff, which Dominance won't. Dominance is only basic attack pen. So in my opinion, Executioner is slightly better than Dominance, but not worth going up an entire tier over Dominance. Obviously, you almost always build both of these in your build right now because you need that percent pen to shred the tanks and increase your kin size procs with Executioner and stuff like that. Bancroft's Talon will drop in D tier. This item is absolute garbage right now. It wasn't even good before they nuked the amount of power that it gives. You know, this item went through 10.3 and got its lifesteal absolutely destroyed, and then it went through 10.6 and got its power absolutely destroyed. I think this item only gives 70 power now and 70 on the passive, so even when you're at minimum health and this thing's giving you the maximum amount of value, it's only giving you 140 power. That sounds like a lot, and it kind of is in this meta, but when you're at full health and you're just trying to poke in a team fight and this item's giving you 70 power and like 10% lifesteal and that's it, this item feels horrible right now. Bancroft's Claw got nerfed a while back and isn't really that useful anymore, and Nimble Bancroft's is really hard to fit into any kind of magical ADC build. No real reason to build Bancroft's Talon right now. Even on Anubis, you're not even building this, and that's when you know it's bad. Pythagorean's Piece, I think, is solid right now. A little bit underrated. Do we put it in B or A, though? I think I'll put it in B. It's not really being built that much, but in my opinion, in a meta where the stats have been kind of nuked, this item's aura provides like a decent amount of value to the team. Maybe you would want this on some mid laners, perhaps, if you maybe want to go into like a Typhon's later or something, which we'll talk about in a second, but I kind of like this on supports, to be honest. Could also get away with it for Guardian, Magical Solos. I think it would be a good item there as well. Soul Gem, fallen off a little bit since a few patches ago. I think it's still a solid item. Little bit situational. You don't really want this on every single mage, but on mages with low cooldowns that can proc it, and stuff like Giannis that can proc it with his portals and threshold, it is really good. But I think we'll drop it in B. It's definitely not a mainstay build of mid builds right now. There's other stuff you need in your mid build, like a ton of percent pen, E-Staff, and Reaver, and you don't really have room for Soul Gem in the build. But it's not a terrible item by any means. Typhon's Fang. I want to put this in A, but it's hard to justify putting it in A when all of the other lifesteal items are probably going to end up in B. This item is pretty solid right now, because mainly for the 20% pen, you know, if you have some other lifesteal in your build, if you have a Pyth piece, a Soul Gem, a Spear of the Magus or something, this item's maybe worth going for the 20% pen. But I think it will be hard to justify putting it anywhere higher than B with all of the other lifesteal items in B. But this is a really solid item right now, in my opinion. It's very close to being A tier. Typhon's is pretty good. Book of Thoth will throw straight to D tier. This item got nerfed 3 patches in a row when it wasn't even good. For most of those times it got nerfed. You know, the first time this got hit was justified. The second time was like, why? The third time was like, what on earth are high-res even smoking? This item's dead. It provides, like, I think only a little over 100 power when stacked, which is just abysmal, because all this item does really is give you power. I mean, it gives you infinite mana, but you can get mana elsewhere in the build. You're not really too bothered about that. Tablet of Destinies is probably equally dead for the same reason. These two items kind of live and die together. Maybe I'll put Tablet in C tier simply because I think it has a small amount of application on Guardian solos, you know, like RTO, where you just go this and then you go a tank mana build with like Breastplate of Valor and stuff like that. And I think it has a little bit of potential there as like a proc item for tanks. He's probably overrating it, to be honest, putting it in C, but it's not quite as bad as Book of Thoth. Polynomicon is fine. We might need to zoom out a little here. Probably have to zoom out throughout the video, considering how many items I have to place. Polynomicon, I think, is a fine item. It's a little bit situational. You only really want this on gods that can, you know, cast a CC ability and immediately follow up with this. So, like a Kulkan, Scylla, maybe Hebo. Not for every mage, but I think on the mages it's good on. It's pretty solid for overall just like increasing your damage output. Soul Reaver, probably an S tier item right now. You could argue for it being A tier, but mage builds right now are relying heavily on those procs. Tanks are strong, so percent max health damage from Soul Reaver is really good. Soul Reaver should be in every single mage build right now, in my opinion. If you're not building Soul Reaver, you're kind of trolling. Obsidian Shard. Is it A or is it S? Because after the recent buffs, I think it's going to be a really strong item and probably a mainstay of mid builds. But I think I'll drop it in A tier for now. Obviously, in a recent patch, it went from 10% pen to 20% pen on the passive. So now your first ability is going to have 40% pen. Really solid. This item's super good right now because of the tank meta. You know, you kind of need this on mid-mages. You need percent pen to be able to actually deal with those tanks and not just let them dive you for free. This item's really solid. Arguably S tier, but probably not quite as good as the stuff that I have up here. Spear of the Magus is decent. We'll drop it in B. I don't think it's quite an A tier item, but provides good stats. That damage amplification on the passive, even though it got nerfed, is still pretty decent. You can go this plus like a Typhon's, and that gives you 30% pen, a little bit of lifesteal, some other good stats. Spear of Deso is A though. This is the go-to flat pen option if you don't want Divine Ruin in your mid builds right now. Most people are like rushing into this or going something with high power and then rushing into this. The 10% cooldown plus the cooldown reduction on the passive, the burst where like you can kill a guy and then have like most of your cooldowns back and be able to kill another guy is pretty insane. This item's really good right now. Should be your go-to flat pen rush in mid, unless you need Divine Ruin, which I'll throw in A as well. Divine Ruin, in my opinion, really good item. Obviously, you only buy it if you need the anti-heal, but when you do that, you're not really particularly sad because this item has decent power, flat pen, and a passive that just chains damage to everyone. This item got probably the best unique passive out of all of the anti-heal items when they got them, other than Contagion at release. But Contagion now, in my opinion, isn't as good as it used to be, and so I think Divine Ruin probably has the best of those ancillary passives. Divine Ruin's really solid. If the enemy has significant self-healing or team healing, you should absolutely be buying this in your mid-builds instead of Spear of Desolation. Chronos Pendant is okay. We'll drop it in B. I'm not a huge fan of Pendant right now. Pendulum of the Ages is still kind of the go-to for mid laners, and so it's kind of hard to fit in Pendulum and Chronos Pendant because then you're at the CDR cap, and if you wanted to go something else like Spear of Desolation or anything else that has cooldown on it, you're kind of a little bit limited in that regard, so you don't really need Pendant to be able to hit 40% CDR. You know, in the late game when you have Power Pot, just Pendulum, Spear of Desolation, and Power Pot is 40%, so you can't really fit Chronos Pendant in your build realistically without wasting a little bit of its CDR. But I don't think it's that bad, and if you are going Archmage's Gem in your build, I think it's actually pretty fine to cap out your CDR with this. It's just Pendulum is usually better than Gem in most builds right now. Charon's Coin will throw to A tier alongside Obsidian Shard. A lot of mages are going both of these in their build right now to have that 40% base pen and then the extra from Obsidian Shard, because you just need it to shred tanks in the current meta. If you're going to go one or the other and you don't want both in your build, Shard is better right now in my opinion. I think pre-buff to the Shard they were probably about equal, but now that Shard provides 20% on your first initial hit, I think Shard is overall the better option for magical percent pen in mid. But a lot of times you're building both of these in your build right now, so they're both really solid in my opinion, great against the tank meta. Rod of Tahuti will throw in A tier as well, just a really solid stat stick, percent pen, MP5, huge power, and then more damage to low health targets. Probably a slight bit wasted if you're going Obsidian Shard and Charons in your build, because then you're hitting the percent pen cap and you're wasting the percent pen on Rod of Tahuti. So maybe if you're going a single one of these items, you can then go like a Rod and then something else, maybe a Staff of Murden that has like 10% penetration, and then you still hit the 40% cap. Doom Orb, I think, is still pretty solid. I don't know whether to put it in A tier or B tier, because I think it did get hit pretty hard with the power reductions. It's lost a lot of the power that it had, and it's not as great as an early game power spike item. But I don't think it's quite as bad as the stuff I have in B tier, so I'll still drop Doom Orb in A. It still has percent pen, big power, movement speed, more power and movement speed from the passive stacks. It's still a solid item in my opinion. Obviously especially good on those mages that don't have like innate mobility in their kit, you know, the Vulcans, the Hebos, that kind of stuff. They like that little bit of extra movement speed a bit more. Onto the rings. So we've seen a small amount of resurgence of magical ADCs in the meta. We saw Ferryman play Freya in the finals and do really well with it. We've seen a lot of Ola run coming out as well. So I think the rings are slightly better than they would have been a couple of patches ago. Cyclopean Ring is probably one of the better ones of them in my opinion. So I think I'll drop it in A. It got buffed recently to have even more percent max health damage. It's kind of like the magical version of Kin Size, I suppose, and Kin Size is kind of the go-to right now. In this tank meta, having that 8%, I think it's 8% max HP damage on your first basic after a while is just really solid to have, and it's probably one of the better rings for the magical ADCs. Telkines is also fine in my opinion. Telkines is pretty solid. You're often building this in like your early builds and on a magical ADC so you can get that damage out while it's like useful, because it's now flat damage instead of a percentage of your power. Just decent stats, bonus auto attack damage, power, attack speed, lifesteals, kind of all the stuff you need on an early game magical ADC. Demonic Grip will throw in B. It's a solid option. You probably need it on a magical ADC because it's the only realistic way for them to get good percent pen, and it's 30%, which is quite high. It's higher than a lot of the other percent pen options. Obviously, you have to hit 3 basics to stack it up, but yeah, still a solid option. Probably should be in your magical ADC builds, but it's not an insane item carrying that build by any means. Hasten Ring will also throw in B. Unless you're Freya, this item's S tier if you're Freya, but a lot of the other magical ADCs, you can kind of get away with not going this if you want to, or you can just go it a little bit later in your build. But Freya rushes this. Make sure you're getting this first item on Freya. She needs it. Gem of Isolation, we'll throw in... Do we throw it in C tier and be generous? Yeah, go on then. I want to put this item in D tier, to be honest. It's absolute garbo in my opinion. I've seen a lot of people building it in this meta, and I really don't see why. The only reason it's even slightly useful is that shields are really strong right now. That's pretty much the only reason I'm putting this in C tier when I would have had it in D tier last patch. You're seeing a lot of shields right now. Shell's pretty good. Obviously, Pribwin is insane right now. You're seeing a lot of your Moja, and so this is kind of okay. I guess on Guardian solos and maybe even some supports is a little bit better, but in mid, you just lose so much damage going this item, and its stats are pretty horrible. E-Staff straight to S tier, one of the best items in the game right now, probably top 3 in terms of overall items, up there with Pribwin. This item's ridiculous right now. The proc, it steals so much health. You end up getting about 600 health once you have the passive of this stacked up. And then, of course, you know, you're dealing like 150, 200 damage to people. And, you know, obviously really great against the tank meta because it's percent HP. This item's insane right now. It should be in every single one of your mage builds in my opinion. Warlock Staff, I think is better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. Whether it's worthy of an A tier, maybe it is. I think this item's really solid right now. Provides a really good amount of power when stacked. I think it provides more power than Book of Thoth when stacked, which is kind of insane in my opinion, considering it gives other useful stats like percent pen and health. Obviously, going to be a bit slower than something like a Spear of Desolation rush or a Doom Orb rush in mid, and so if you're going Warlocks, you're going to get out-traded, especially if they rush Flat Pen. That Flat Pen's going to give you a lot more damage early on than Warlock's percent pen. But yeah, I think this item is a little underrated in the meta. It's close to being B, to be honest, but I think this item is pretty solid, especially on like certain mages that like their health a little bit more, maybe a Zhonghui or something like that. Moving on to the healing staffs, I think most of these are pretty garbo. Rejuvenating Heart will drop in B, really sees almost no play. If you're gonna go any of these, in my opinion, on a healer support or something like that, maybe a healer mid, you should be going Rod of Asclepius, because that just straight up boosts all of your healing for like no like condition or anything like that. So if you're gonna go any of these on any of your healers, I think Rod of Asclepius is the better one. In fact, let's move these down. I think Rod of Asclepius should be here and this should be here. Last Gasp is weird because I feel like it does have really good base stats. You know, it's got 15 pen, a lot of power, more power from the passive. So maybe I'll also drop this one in B. I think it is a little underrated and could be a decent rush on healer mids. The problem is healer mids aren't really much of a thing right now. A lot of healers are being thrown into the support role. But yeah, I think where it is useful, this item is very efficiently started and perhaps a little underrated in this meta. Runeforge will drop in A. The glyphs it got are pretty solid. For some reason, they absolutely gutted Flameforged Hammer when it wasn't even that good and didn't touch Pribwin, which is confusing to me. But I think Runebreaking Hammer is actually a little underrated. Reducing their damage output by 10% as well as they take 10% more is actually really solid. Obviously, a little situational. You're going to need some hard crowd control to be able to activate that, and ideally, if you're building Flameforged, you want multiple hard crowd controls to keep them locked in that area, you know, Horus style, Thor style. This item is pretty solid right now, but not anything too broken, in my opinion. Frostbound Hammer will drop in B. This item's pretty bad, in my opinion. Since they added an internal cooldown to it, it just doesn't really fill the same purpose that it did before in terms of auto-attackers sticking to people. Also, auto-attacker solos are really, really not the meta right now. Bellona, Armor, Osiris, Erlang. Erlang is good in jungle, but not from solo. There's really no meta auto-attack warriors in solo right now. It's all ability-based, and so Frostbound suffers a little bit for that reason. Dawnbringer, I'm going to have a little hot take here and throw it to S. You could absolutely argue for it only being A, but I think this item is really insane right now. Gives power, health, CCR, and then when you engage, you get a 30% protection and movement speed boost. The area for being near people, I think, is like 55 units, which is a really large area. You can often dive into the backline, and you're basically guaranteed 2 procs of this. You're probably likely going to get 3. And so you're going to get 30% or maybe a 20% protection and movement speed boost to just run down the backline. This item's insane right now on solo laners. You could probably even build this on like bruiser junglers that engage with their ultimates as well, like Thor or like Raven or something like that. And yeah, I think this item's actually super solid right now, and even being a little underrated. I think people think it's strong, but don't realize how strong this item actually is. It's really good in my opinion. Phalanx will throw in B. No one really builds this too much. If anything, you just see this a little bit on like auto-attack junglers that just want a little bit of like potential tankiness along with their attack speed, because this does provide up to 30% attack speed once it's stacked up, which is reasonably solid. Doesn't really see much play in solo because, again, auto-attack solo laners are not viable right now. I mean, I guess they're viable, but they're absolutely not meta picks. And so this item, you really kind of want it on those auto-attack solo laners. They're going to use that 30% attack speed super effectively. Most of the top solo laners right now, like Raven, Tyr, Thor, Wukong, they just don't use this item very well. Berserker's Shield, kind of in a similar case to Phalanx, really. Auto-attack solo laners are pretty bad, so you're not really going to be seeing this item very much. I think it is probably a main build on a lot of the auto-attacking solo laners, like Vamana is probably the only one that's viable right now, but like Bellona, Armor, Osiris, they probably all want this item. It's just they're all pretty bad right now, and so I don't think this item's particularly good. You might see it occasionally on some auto-attack junglers and auto-attack ADCs as well, that kind of want a little bit, you know, maybe like Freya might want this item, or like Baka, if he wants a bit of tankiness, might want this item, maybe Kali. But in general, not super good, but not terrible either. Glad Shield straight to S tier. This item's insane right now. Part of the just general like proc damage solo laner builds that are dominating right now with Pribwin, Glad Shield, Manticore Spikes, Archdruid's Fury, all those kind of items just hit a critical mass where solo laners are able to solo backliners with all these damage effects. Glad Shield is kind of like one of the best ones of those. You know, just getting extra damage on every single ability. The base stats are really good for the laning phase. Health, protections, CCR. Not CCR, sorry, CDR, and then also HP 5. Really good for the laning phase, and also really good for late game team fights when you're getting those procs and just doing a ton of extra damage. Toxic Blade's pretty bad right now, in my opinion. Anti-heal typically isn't built by the ADC. The ADC has more important stuff to throw in their build. ADC builds are quite condensed right now. You know, you kind of just need like your starter, Devos, Xe, Dominance, Kins, and then either Titans or Oboe, or maybe sell your starter and get Titans and Oboe. ADC builds, you kind of don't have room for an item like this at the moment. Maybe you could go it on auto-attack junglers, but you're often just better getting anti-heal on your mid laner and your jungler and your solo and your support. ADC anti-heal isn't really a thing, and so this item isn't super popular. Lotus Sickle, I think, is great right now. It did take a little bit of a nerf in the patch recently, but I think this item's still really solid on the gods that it's useful on. A little bit situational, obviously, but on any supports that can heal, you know, Sylvanas, Terra, Yamoja, Afro, Hell, really good on all those. Even on, like, your healer mids, I would probably recommend going this item just to survive dives from the soul laner and the jungler. Provides CDR as well, which is really nice for those kind of picks. Just a solid stat stick item, basically. Winged Blade is fine. You can argue for it being A. Maybe it is A. I think this is a really, really strong counter to heavy slow comps, you know, like Nike ult and stuff like that, where you're just going to get, like, your whole team slowed. It just cleanses everyone of that. I think Winged Blade is really good right now. Very situational, of course. You don't even want this against just a couple of slows. You want it against big team-wide AoE slows that are going to screw over your whole team. Obviously, hard counters Horrific Emblem as well, which is a really good item right now. I think Wingblade is super good in the situations where it's good. It's just hard to find, like, the perfect scenario where Wingblade is, like, super insane, but it can be really insane. Relic Dagger, I think I'll throw to A. The new glyphs it got are both really solid in my opinion. The Witchblade Dagger is currently bugged where it's stacking with other attack speed slows, so right now if you want to just screw over hunters, you can just build Witchblade Dagger and also Megardian Mail, and then they're fucked because you can just stack up those 2 attack speed slows on them. That shouldn't be how it works, and it will be fixed, but even when it's fixed, I think the Witchblade upgrade of this is really good. And then also the protections increase and ability to see wards is really good, especially in higher level play when there's going to be a lot more warding and counter warding is more important. And to be honest, there's just a lot of really strong relics right now. Reducing your Sunder cooldown, reducing your Horrific Emblem cooldown, your Blink cooldown, maybe even your Beads cooldown if you're going this on like a jungler or something like that. I think this item's just really good right now. The glyphs it got are really good. The base is pretty solid. Yeah, just a really good item right now. Abyssal Stone. I always have trouble with this item. I have no idea how good it is. I'm waiting on the pros to decide if it's good, basically, because this is a really hard item to, like, decide if it's good or not. That anti-CCR is super hard to see if it's actually getting good value or not. You know, if you're diving and you finish off a mid laner, you don't really know if their cooldowns didn't come up because you hit them with this item or if they just didn't have their cooldowns anyway. It's very hard to know if this is good. So we'll drop it in B for now, but if that passive turns out to be really useful, this item rockets up the tier list because the base stats are really good, and if that effect is actually being used really well, it probably goes to A or maybe even S tier. Archdruid's Fury will drop in A. Really solid item right now for the solo and a proc builds. You know, provides a little 200, 300, maybe even 400 damage burst once you've taken a bunch of damage. Pretty solid overall. Erosion will throw in A as well. Lots of shields in the meta. You know, if there's a lot of Pridwin going on, a lot of Yamoja, a lot of Shells, a lot of Nikes or anything like that, you're absolutely going to want Erosion in your build. Situational, of course, but in the situations where it's good, which are quite common in this meta because of how much shielding there is, Erosion's absolutely worth going for. Stone of Binding will throw to S tier. Really good on soul laners, really good on supports, occasionally good on bruiser junglers as well, like Sir Cap. Insanely efficiently started, like basically every item on this tree is really good because it has both kinds of defense and health, so it's ridiculously good for your effective health and tankiness against everything on the map. And that passive is super useful. Up to 16 flat pen, really good for diving backliners. Now that auras have been nerfed a little bit, this becomes more valuable because instead of backliners having 100 prots, they have like, you know, maybe 70 or 80, and so 15 of that is a larger percentage of like removing their overall prots. Contagion is good right now, really good into a lot of top soul in a matchups like Tia, probably decent into Raven as well. Hercules, obviously, although he's not really a top soul laner anymore, it's still good into that. Probably should be your go-to anti-heal option if you need it as a solo laner. Breastplate of Valor will throw in B. This item's not so great right now. Runs into a similar problem as Chronos Pendant for mages, where it's 20% CDR, and Pridwin should be an auto build on almost every solo in a build right now, so you run into issues where, you know, if you're a warrior, you're already overcapping with just these 2 items, and you can't fit anything else in your build. And you really don't want to be going this just because you're going to be wasting that CDR a lot of the time because you need Pridwin. And overall, it's an okay item. You know, it's just a big stat stick. Breastplate of Regrowth will throw to A. It's been nerfed many times, but it's still a really good item and probably essential on a lot of the gods that use it. You know, your tiers. Probably decent on Raven as well, though I wouldn't argue essential on Raven. Essential on Hercules, obviously. This item's still really strong on the gods that want it. You can maybe even get away with it on some supports. Maybe even on healer mid laners that want to survive the fights, like Hell and Afro. Really solid item on the gods that want it. We're going to have to zoom out a little more. This tier list is going to be incredibly zoomed out by the time we place all of these 131 items, boys. Spectral Armor goes to A tier as well. Crit isn't really meta right now, but this item is super good at the moment. AoE crit reduction for your whole team, as well as giving them a bunch of bonus power, which I'm pretty sure they didn't hit the power that this gives in the power reduction patch, and so it actually gives a disproportionately high amount of power. You know, if crit ever becomes the meta again and people start building Kid Shred builds, which I don't see happening in this current meta given how strong tanks are, but if tanks get nerfed a lot, and we go back to a little bit more of a burst meta and crit becomes a thing, Spectral might even go to S tier. This item's really good right now. It's just not in S tier because crit's not the meta and you don't really need it most games. Sovereignty is fine. We'll just drop it in B tier. It's not a bad item. It's not a great item, to be honest. Provides, you know, just protection always to your backliners. It's okay, especially against like quad physical comps. You're obviously going to want sovereignty, but in your typical game, I would argue you don't need sovereignty on supports, but it's there as an option if you want a little bit of extra defense to your backliners. Midgardian Mail, I'll also throw in B. It arguably could be A, to be honest. I think it's a really solid option against a lot of the auto-attack meta right now. We're seeing a lot of auto-attack junglers, and reducing the attack speed of ADCs is super important given how ridiculously high attack speed they get and how many kin size they're going to get and procs like that. So Midgardian, I think, is good right now. Probably not quite A tier, though. Mystical Mail will drop in C tier. I don't see anyone build this item ever, to be honest. Could arguably be D tier. You just don't really need it right now. The base stats are horrendous because the effect that it gives is so powerful, but that effect just doesn't really do enough for you in this meta. There's way better stuff you could be building on solo laners. Emperor's Armor will drop in B as well. Again, arguably could be A, I think, especially if you need it, like if you're struggling to siege or you're struggling to defend against sieges, you could absolutely pick up an Emperor's Armor on support, and there's no problem with that. It's a decent item right now. Moving on to Kusari's, Genji's Guard, I think is fine. It's not an insane item right now, but if you're running into a magical matchup against a mage or a guardian, this item's pretty good for standard ability-based gods. You know, CDR, bonus CDR on the passive. MP5 is also nice. Just a general, like, okay, first magical item defense. Magical defense is kind of lacking in solo right now. There's a ton of really good physical defense options for early game, like Breastplate of Regrowth and Glad Shield and Contagion and stuff, but Magical's lacking a little bit. Genji's Guard is probably one of the better options of them, but they're all not great, to be honest. It feels really bad as a warrior to queue into a Guardian or a Mage in the current meta just because of how bad a lot of the magical defense options are for, like, rushes and stuff. That's why, like, Guardians and Mages are actually a little bit better than you would think, even though, like, they're not inherently good. They force the enemy solo to build, like, really weirdly and not rush into items that they want, like Glad Shield. Only Hunter's Garb, I think I'll put in A. It's usually not like a laning rush item. It will be a little bit inefficient there because you're not going to be getting the full stacks of the damage mitigation passive. But if you need a little bit of magical defense later in your build, if you're against a physical laner, but, you know, the mage is giving you trouble in the late game, you can absolutely slot in Only Hunter's Garb. It's really good right now, in my opinion. That 9% mitigation helps you survive a lot more when you're in the backline. Shoguns will throw in B. I think Shoguns is absolutely fine right now. It's nothing insane. Obviously, it's better when you have an auto-attacking solo laner like Bellona, Amaterasu, and stuff like that. But you can still build it, you know, especially on supports, for example, if you've got, like, an ADC, like if you're on a double Hunter comp, or you've got an ADC and auto-attack jungler, like Bakasura. This item's pretty solid, definitely buildable, but nothing insane, in my opinion. Mail of Renewal, probably in B as well. It got hit relatively hard by the healing reduction changes in 10.3 and not really compensated that much. The base stats are pretty decent, and that heal can be useful, but I just don't think it's anything super crazy right now, but it's not a bad item by any means. You can absolutely get away with building it. Cannoneer's Cuirass. They gave this some major buffs a while back. I was thinking it might actually come into the meta, but it seems like it really hasn't. I'm going to leave it in C tier. That gold generation has potential to be really broken, but no one's building it right now. People are just rushing Thebes instead, and so it's really just not that great. Stone of Gaia will also throw in C. This item's pretty bad. Just provides health and no protection, so it's not great for your effective health and actual tankiness. It might be buildable into really heavy knockup-based teams, but overall, just not that great of an item in my opinion. Gauntlet of Thebes goes straight to S tier. This item's as insane as it always has been. There's probably not an item tier list where this thing isn't in S tier. It's ridiculous. The stats it provides are ridiculously efficient. Obviously, it's a support item, and that's why it gets away with being so ridiculous. If there was a solo laner item that was giving this efficient defense stats in the early game, people would be crying their eyes out. But because it's for supports, it's kind of like allowed. And I think this thing is 55 of each and 150 health now, or something like that. It's changed a lot because they reduced the stats in the most recent patch, but they reduced the stats on everything, and so it's absolutely fine. Thebes is still great. Prophetic Cloak kind of got shadow nerfed in this patch because you can't realistically hit 600 procs anymore in your builds, and so Prophetic isn't anywhere near as good. Thebes should be your go-to rush in supports right now. Insane item. Moving on to some earrings. So Fabulous Hoops, I'll throw in B. Decent base stats, cooldown reduction, magical procs. I think it has health as well. And the passive, giving you a little bit of a shield. It's a fine item, but it's nothing insane right now. You can probably build this on, like, your healer supports and maybe even your healer mids and kind of be fine with it, but it's not crazy. Griffin Wing Earrings is an interesting one. I've been seeing a lot of people trying to rush this, like they grab the tier 2 and no starter item and then they finish it early. I think the stats are actually competitive now. When this released, the stats were like horrible, but now it has 30% attack speed and like a decent amount of power. I think this is kind of okay. Whether or not it's in A tier, I don't really know. I think it's probably not quite there, but I have seen some people trying to rush this in like high level EU ranked, and it's kind of worked out for them. I just don't think it's like that insane. Manticore spikes. It was S tier before the nerf. Whether it's S tier after the nerf, I don't really know. I think it might go down to A tier, actually. This item was insane before it got nerfed down by like 1%. It used to deal 4% and 8% if it was you. Now it does 3% and 6% if it was you. It's not quite as good, but the base stats are still insane. I always think this is on the Druid Stone tree because it has the exact same like stat spread as a lot of the stone items like Arc Druid's Erosion and Stone of Binding. You know, just both kind of prots and health, and then a useful, like, usually damage amplifying passive effect. It's kind of very similar to a lot of these items, and it's really good. You could probably argue for this still being S tier, but I think with the nerf, it probably does come down a tier. Sphinx Baubles. So, not as bad as it used to be. I think this item is kind of okay. I've seen a lot of people... who is it? Auto Speed, I think, builds this on Loki for 50% CDR, because that's really insane. On Loki, you can just be super annoying when you have, like, constant invisibility, constant decoys, your ult comes up more often. And so, yeah, we'll throw it in B tier. I used to think this item was, like, actually unusable, but it's been proven that it is okay on certain picks, and I think maybe even on a couple of mage mids, you can maybe get away with this. Heart Ward goes in the same tier as Sovereignty for the same reason. It's not a particularly strong item, not a must build on supports by any means, but if you do want to give your team a little bit of that extra magical defense, you can absolutely buy it on supports, no problem. Talisman of Energy, probably B tier as well. It's buildable, but nothing too strong in my opinion. Pestilence, does Pestilence go to A tier? Probably not. I think it is worse than Contagion overall as like a tank item anti-heal option, but it can be ridiculous. You know, it can give up to, I think, 55% anti-heal, and granted the cap for anti-heal is, I think, now 75%. So you're getting pretty close to that cap just in one item, and then if the rest of your team are throwing anti-heal, you maybe don't need Pestilence to actually like hit the cap. You know, if you hit him with a Brawler's Divine and Pestilence Aura, they're going to be way over the cap, and you may as well have Contagion at that point. But Pestilence is still solid. If you need magical defense and anti-heal, you can absolutely still go. The base stats are really efficient, and it provides the most anti-heal of any item in the game, I think, even more than Tainted Breastplate once it's stacked up. Absolution will throw in B tier as well. I think it does have some niche use against, you know, telegraphed heavy CCs like Cerberus ult and Ares ult on gods that have quick ults that can easily just, like, get out, you know, that their ult and just, like, give that CC immunity to allies. Got buffed recently to provide 10% max mana heal when you ult, which is nice, but doesn't make the item anything insane. I think it's buildable, but not great and very situational. Prophetic Cloak. I think I'll drop this in A. It was S tier before the patch, but it's just kind of a little bit hard to get to 600 prots with this thing now. You can still do it with a full tank support build, but it comes online a lot later because you're getting less prots overall, and it's actually kind of hard to reach that 600 cap to get the full value of the damage mitigation from this. And it's also way slower than Thieves. Thieves is going to make you much more tanky in the early game. It's still one of the best items in the game when it's stacked. You know, if you can stack it and reach that 600 prot requirement, it's the best tank item in the game in terms of the stats that it provides. So it is still solid, and I think if they change it to where the prot requirement is a bit lower because they reduced all the prots in the game, it might go back up to S tier, but at the moment it's just a little hard to hit that 600 prot like cap for the damage mitigation on it. Spirit Robe, A tier item. Spirit Robe is just a quintessential Smite item that's never really bad. That passive is always going to be useful, stopping you getting just like chain CC'd and blown up. You get that big damage mitigation when you get CC'd. Base stats are solid, both kinds of defenses and a little bit of CDR. I think this also has CCR on it as well. So just a really solid item that's pretty much never bad. If you're worried about getting blown up when you get CC'd down as a tank, just buy this. It's no problem. You can buy it on supports where it's more popular, but you can also buy it on some solos and get away with it as well. Mantle of Discord's been seeing a little bit more play recently. I think it's still worse than Spirit Robe, but I'm tempted to put it in A tier. It fills a similar purpose. I think Spirit Robe does it better, but of course, with Mantle, if you're getting, like, CC'd and bursted down, once you get a little bit low, you get that big stun around your CC immunity you can kind of get out, whereas Spirit Robe just gives you mitigations to stop you dying in the first place. Base stats are very similar. Mantle doesn't have that CCR, of course, but has a generally, like, more impactful passive, I suppose. This item would have been B, but I've seen a lot of people building it actually in the current meta and like doing quite well with it. Magi is also A, a little bit situational of course, so you really only need this if you're worried very heavily about getting bursted down. A lot of supports have been buying this, especially supports without CC immune ultimates that can get locked down and picked very easily. You know, Atlas, that kind of stuff, he loves this item. And since they put CDR on it, it's a little bit more useful on damage dealers as well. You know, maybe on your junglers, maybe on your mid laners. If you're a little bit worried about just like the tank diving you and CCing you down, you can go Magi's. It's absolutely fine. Both glyph options are pretty good. On damage dealers, you want Magi's Revenge. On most supports, you also want Magi's Revenge, to be honest. But Magi's Shelter can work pretty well against certain teams. And that's all the tier 3 items. So if that's what you were looking for, that's done now. We're going to be moving on to starter items. So yeah, actually, let's do that. I'm going to remove all the other items from the tier list and place the starter items separately because they're on their own level of power. Every starter item in the game is better than almost every tier 3 item in the game, other than specifically like really strong ones. And so I think we'll place these all on their own. Alright, so here we go with the starter items. I removed those purely because they're just on their own power level. Like, it would be weird to place some starter items below some tier 3 items that the starter item is clearly better because starter items just are better. So placing them on their own rankings relative to each other rather than relative to every item in the game would make sense because most of these are better than every tier 3 item in the game. So Bluestone Brooch goes straight to S tier. Almost all the top solo laners right now are just building this. You know, this in combination with all the other solo laner proc items allows them to do pretty insane damage to the backline. Tier, Raven, you know, a lot of the top solo laners, Thor as well, are building this. It's really insane right now. Redstone, I'll put in B. I think it's a decent item. You could argue for it being A as well, because it does provide a lot of stats. You know, once you stack it up, it's like 50% attack speed, a bunch of bonus prots, power. You still get a mini version of this effect, but it doesn't do % health damage, so it's not anywhere near as good in this meta, in my opinion. Both sigils, I think, go to A tier. I think they both have their merits. Sigil of the Old Guard is still really good and the best overall solo laner item for making you uber tanky. But you will lack a little bit of damage if you go this. And then Infused Sigil, I think, is actually really good. Most of the top solo laners right now would just rather have Bluestone because it's more consistent, but this thing does provide a really huge burst damage when you dive into the backline that I think is actually really solid in this meta. I would even argue Infused Sigil is better than Sigil of the Old Guard since they kind of gutted this item. Sundering Axe will also throw in A. Sundering Axe is really good. Again, a lot of the top solo laners just use Bluestone better right now, but on the ones that don't use Bluestone, I would recommend Sundering Axe as your damage proc into the backline kind of item to boost your damage. Sundering Axe is really good. Axe of Animosity will throw in C. Pretty garbo item, to be honest, mainly because attack speed solo laners are just not viable at the moment. Archmage's Gem will throw in B. I think it's okay, maybe even a little bit underrated. The damage that it provides is actually pretty solid, but generally you're going to be going Sands in this meta, and even if you're going Gem, a lot of mid laners right now prefer the Gem of Focus. Recently, they removed the damage mitigation from this item and buffed up the power, the damage increase, and the movement speed that it gives. And so it's a little bit less useful for maybe those Guardian solos, although you might still want it on a lot of Guardian solos, but it's more useful for mids now. This item's super good on gods that can proc it very easily. You know, Merlin kind of likes this item. You can also go Pendulum on Merlin as well, but if you go this and Chronos Pendant for your CDR, it's also pretty good on Merlin. Alternate Timeline goes back to D tier. As always, this item pretends to save you and then almost never does. About 10% of the time this activates, you're actually going to live, and it's on a 6-minute cooldown, so basically it's going to save you once every 5 games or something. Don't build this item, it's garbo. Pendulum, straight to S tier, the go-to for mid laners right now, has been the go-to for probably a year or more. This item's just super efficient, it gives you everything you need, a bunch of power and CDR, that's just what you need on a mid lane mage right now. You're just throwing out abilities, that's just what you need. It's just the best mid lane starter option for the most part. Sack Shroud will throw in B, probably would have been a little bit lower, but has seen a little bit of use, specifically on Zhonghui. You know, he likes that way, he can just ult in and have insane damage, and it's also pretty good for his early laning phase, the base version of this item. Bloodsoak Shroud, I think I'll also throw in B. This is probably the go-to if you're going to want to go Vamp Shroud on a Guardian solo, like Artio or something like that. You could argue Gem is probably better in that case, but if you do want to go Shroud, this is what you should be going to on a magical solo for that big burst healing every time you cast an ability. I think this item is a little underrated right now. Seer of the Jungle will throw in B. SPL players kind of like this a little bit more, and if you're in really high-end ranked where everyone's warding and vision control is super important, this item probably goes up a tier, but for most people, this item is just way outclassed by Protector of the Jungle, which will throw to S tier. This item is ridiculous. Kind of been the go-to for most junglers for a long time. 35% attack speed is ridiculous, and even on non-attack speed junglers, it just makes your AA cancels and general chase down with a few basic attacks after dumping your kit just a lot better. The stats it provides are insane. Bonus percent protections and power when in the jungle as well. Just one of the best stat stick items for junglers available at the moment. Bomber Spear, I'll throw to A. I think Bomber Spear is really good right now. You even saw Cyclone build this on Freya ADC, just because it's got percent pen, cooldown reduction, big power, and then that 10% damage increase when you kill a jungle boss. This item's just really solid right now. Nothing particularly wrong with it. Big stat stick. And then Bumba's Hammer. I think Bumba's Hammer is a little bit worse. But in the cases where it's good, I think this item is actually buildable. I kind of like this on Thor. You know, when you ult in and you throw your hammer and then you do a bunch of air cancels, you're going to get a bunch of cooldowns off of your abilities as you're doing that. Not really applicable to most junglers. You're often better going spear or protector of the jungle, which is why it's a tier below, but I think this item does have some use. Mannequin Mace will throw to C, maybe even D. No one really builds Mannequin Scepter anymore. They kind of destroyed it a while back when there was a lot of Osiris and Erlang jungle building Mannequin Scepter. I think it was before Worlds, and they wanted to destroy it so that it wasn't like running the meta at Worlds, and they haven't buffed it back since then. It's kind of just a useless item at the moment. Mannequin Hidden Blade, though, I will throw to B. The base version is so bad that it makes you not want to build this, but I think Mannequin Hidden Blade is really good. Once you can get in and just like, it's kind of like Sundering Axe in a way, and you just engage and then 20% of the enemy's health is just gone off of your engage, and I think that is actually pretty solid. Sentinel's Boon, we'll throw in C. This item, really not that great. Build it in Assault and it's hilarious, but building it in Conquest is kind of hard to get like fights happening around like minion waves or camps that are dying to like heal you in combat. And yes, it can heal you up really effectively out of combat, but you're almost always better going Sentinel's Embrace, which... Is it S or is it A? Probably A now. They nerfed it pretty substantially. Used to give way more procs at release, and they've nerfed that quite a few times, and they nerfed it again in the recent patch where they were reducing all the procs. I think it now shares 60, so if you're near one backliner, you're giving them 30 of each procs, which is really good. And if you're near two backliners, you're giving them 20 each, which is solid. This item is one of the go-tos for support, but I just don't think it's quite as strong as some of the S-tier items I've got up here. Spartan Flag is Garbo, don't build it. It's very hard to like deploy that flag and actually keep the fight in that area. A lot of these effects, you know, Brawler's Beat Stick's new passive as well, it's just really hard to like deploy something and then somehow keep the fight in that area. The fights move around a lot in Smite, they're very fluid, and oftentimes you're going to deploy Spartan Flag, and then the fight's going to move out of the area, and you're not going to get that much value out of it. War Banner is the better version in my opinion, which I'll throw to B. We've seen a little bit of this. I think, is it Jake that likes this in the SPL for the Only Warriors? I've seen a lot of Spartan Flag, not Spartan Flag, sorry. I've seen a lot of War Banner out of him. He likes the War Flag, like early game aggression. And it is okay. You know, it's being built by one of the top supports in the league, arguably the top support in the league, and so there is some merit to that. But this item, I just generally prefer the defensive support auras. I think they're generally better for just keeping your backline alive in the late game team fights. Speaking of, Compassion is really good, especially good on gods that don't really need the mana. You know, your Mojo loves this kind of item, don't need the mana restoration from Sentinels early game. Just redirecting damage that your teammates take to you is always going to be really good, makes them overall more tanky. And also Heroism is A as well. I think all three of these support starters up here are like really good, and you can absolutely build any of them and be fine most games. I think all three of these are like probably on an even power level. If I had to choose one, I'd probably choose Sentinels because I like that playstyle of just, you know, stick to my backliners and keep them alive through procs. But all three of these are really good. Heroism especially good against divers that like engage with a CC onto your backline. But yeah, all three of these are good. You can get away with any of them in support. Death's Embrace, I think I'll throw to B. This item is better than it's being used right now, in my opinion, because ADCs just go Death's Temper or like Cowl or something like that, and auto-attack solo laners are Garbo. But if auto-attack solo laners ever become the meta, I think this item is insane, to be honest. The CDR is super good. The max health healing, decent base stats overall. I think this item is better than it's being showcased simply because the meta doesn't favor it at the moment. Death's Temper will throw in A. This is typically the go-to for most ADCs right now. If you're not selling Death's Toll in the late game, you'll upgrade into this. Obviously, sometimes you sell Death's Toll if you want the triple % pen build with Dominance, Exi, and Titans in one build, because then you also need Devos, Exi, and Oboe, and so that's all 6 items for you. But if you don't really need the Titans for that extra crazy % pen, you just go Death's Temper. 35% attack speed, good base stats. If you can stack that passive up in a team fight, bunch of bonus damage for your auto attack, so it's pretty good. Other options for ADCs right now though, Hunter's Cowl I think is pretty solid. Is it as good as Death's Temper? I don't think so I'll drop it in B. And then Leader's Cowl I'll also drop in B. I think these two are both really good. We've been seeing a little bit more Leader's Cowl lately for that bonus damage to all of your allies in like a big AoE, but I think this one's also pretty solid. It provides like some of the highest attack speed in the game once you're near an ally, and also gives the ally attack speed as well, so it's kind of nice on like double hunter comps and stuff like that. But yeah, both of these are pretty solid in my opinion. You could argue for both of them being in A tier alongside Death's Temper, but I think Death's Temper is just a little bit better at the moment and also has a better base fall in my opinion. The arrows, I always forget which one's which. This is the crit one, right? No, wait, this is the gold one. The gold one isn't too great in my opinion. I'll throw it in C tier. In fact, I think I'll throw both of these in C tier. Arrow's just not that great right now. I know a lot of people do like it, but personally, I don't think it's that great. The crit arrow, which I believe is this one, I always forget because I never build these, and I don't really see anyone build them either. They both look very similar. But yeah, this one, I think it is, that has crit, I think will be good if crit was the meta. Obviously, you typically build this on Sol because she uses the basic attack damage super well in the early game, but very situational, this item overall, and you're almost always better going Cowl or Death's Toll in the laning phase. Tainted Breastplate will throw in A, really good. If you need that anti-heal starter, a lot of the time in solo lane, you kind of don't really want to go this because you want Bluestone or Axe to be able to threaten the backline in the late game with those proc damages, but if you're into a matchup where they have heavy healing, this is really good, and obviously if the enemy team has a team healer like Hel, Sylvanas, Guan Yu, that kind of stuff, you're probably going to want this. It's a really solid anti-heal option, to be honest. And Tainted Amulet is just as good in my opinion, but fills a slightly different purpose. You know, you're going to be reducing healing a little bit less, but you're going to be getting some of that healing back. I think both of these are really solid options. And finally, we have the masks. Rangda's Mask, of course, goes straight to D tier. It's a troll item. It's funny. It's hilarious. I love building this item in random casual modes. But don't seriously build this item and expect to do work with it in a high-level conquest game. It's not going to go well for you. Lonos, on the other hand, is insane. It's very situational. You can only build this, obviously, on non-tanky supports, so like assassins and mages and stuff like that, but on those picks, I think it is ridiculous. This item provides so many good stats for you. And yeah, that's the starter items. So we obviously did the tier 3 items earlier in the video, so that's everything. That's every single item. I think 131 items placed. That's what I think of the meta right now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know if you want me to do more of these item tier lists in the future. I typically do more so the like top 3 items for every role as like an overview, because I think more people enjoy that, of just getting like a quick overview of like a few things they should be building rather than sitting through a... I've been recording for an hour right now. It won't quite be an hour long, the video, probably like 45, 50 minutes, but it's a long video, and I know a lot of people don't want to sit through such a long video, but some people do like it, so let me know down below and drop a like on the video to show support for this kind of video if you want to see it in the future, and I will catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.